It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the films of July 10th, 1998. We got 5 movies to look at today, so let's go ahead and jump right on into it. And we'll start off with the biggest new release of the weekend, and that is the fourth and final installment of the Lethal Weapon series, Lethal Weapon 4. So yeah, Lethal Weapon 4, the fourth and final installment of the Lethal Weapon series. This is the last one that Richard Donner did before he died, and the latest one to be theatrically, although there have been some reports that there's gonna be another movie, a lethal finale as they call it, which is supposed to be in development for HBO Max, or Max at this point. It's HBO Max. I mean, and Mel Gibson supposedly is going to direct it, with him and Danny Glover returning as Riggs and Murtaugh. And I mean, you know how they used to say in the old trailers for the other two movies that the magic was there, the magic is back? I think a lot of people would agree that the magic is definitely lost in this film, but not all the way through. I just think that Lethal Weapon 4 just kind of shows you that the series has kind of gone past its prime, but that being said, there is still a lot to appreciate about the movie, and I think the trailer does a pretty good job of showing some of the best moments in there. Like, you have the opening scene where Riggs and Murtaugh are fighting against the guy who is the guy who, in the rain, and and Riggs and Murtaugh's got to Officer and Danny Glover's character's got to take his clothes off to distract the guy, and that's the opening scene of the movie, and it's actually a really good opening scene. Plus that scene where Mel Gibson's fighting with the guy in the house on the road. That's a good scene as well. There are definitely moments where the magic is still there, but this is definitely the one Lethal Weapon movie where a lot of the flaws really do start to connect in here. I think they do add a little too many different characters in the movie. Like, you have Chris Rock and Jet Li joining. You have characters that were introduced in previous films. Joe Pesci and Rene Russo coming back into play in here. Rene Russo's character is pregnant in the movie. She has a bigger role in here. A lot of the same people from the other movies are back as well, including Darlene Love as Murtaugh's wife. The movie overall, it's not a bad movie. It's just the one that definitely has the most flaws out of all the Lethal Weapon films. And it is starting to get a little bit tiring. It was starting to get a little bit tiring at this point, but never to the point where the movie never had any moments in there where I felt like they were really pushing their buttons and just there was no reason to make this movie. There were elements in here that definitely did work to the film's favor. I mean, there were good funny moments in the film. There were good moments in the film with the main cast. There's a great moment at the end of the trailer with Chris Rock and Joe Pesci having a scene that's actually well done. But yeah, it's definitely losing a lot of the steam that it had going forward. And honestly, I'm kind of glad they ended it with this film. And really, I don't think they really need to do another one, especially now that it's been 25 years since this last movie. You know me, if you've been following my stuff for the longest time now, I have a thing against sequels that come over 20 years after the last film that came out. Like, I mean, I didn't like Coming to America, the sequel to the Eddie Murphy movie. There's been a lot of other sequels that I've been not the biggest fan of that have been like over 20 plus years in development. But every once in a while you get one good one. But other than that, other than that, most of the time they aren't really all that great. And you could definitely tell that this movie just didn't feel like it had that same magic. And now I'm just realizing that this thing started shooting at the beginning of January of 1998. For a fourth film in the series that's supposed to be out in July, that means they had 7 months to get this movie made. 7 months. They had editors coming in, working around the clock to make sure that this film gets released in theaters in July. And you know, you could have fixed those problems if you'd shoot it a little bit earlier than that. Like, you don't usually film a big summer blockbuster like this at the start of the year. I mean, it's just weird why they did that, and maybe that's the reason why this doesn't have that same magic as the other films do, because they were so desperate to get this out there in theaters for this particular weekend, and the end result ends up being what it is. I mean, it's not a bad movie, but it definitely is a film that I'm glad they stopped here. I kind of want them to stop here. I really want them to have that sequel they're talking about. Be one of those things where they say, hey, let's do it, and then they never really do it. Like, they say they're going to, like, if someone tells you, hey, we're going to go out later, and then it's later, and it's just like, oh, yeah, I had something else to do. Like, that's what I want this new Lethal Weapon movie to be like. One of those things where they talk about it, they say they're going to do it, and then they never do it. It's just something that just never comes to fruition, because at this point, they were really pushing their buttons. And then there was, not to mention, there was another action comedy coming out in a couple months that was going to take a lot of Lethal Weapon's thunder away. So, honestly, yeah, I'm glad they stopped after this. I really don't want to see them do another one of these, honestly. And I mean, overall, I do like the majority of the Lethal Weapon movies, but I will say that 2 is where the really good stuff ends, and 3 and 4 are just kind of like hit and miss, with more misses than hits at times. That's pretty much all I got to say about that one. That's Lethal Weapon. So let's go ahead and move on to the next movie that came out this weekend, and that is Small Soldiers. But this is Small Soldiers. Joe Dante directed this movie, and it's basically about these 2 kids who get caught up in the middle of a war between 2 different sentient action figures, the Gorgonites and the Commando Elite. And of course, the toy company that puts this together has a government military technology placed into these, enabling them to talk. But there are also special microchips that the 2 opposing sides of the toy line start thinking for themselves, engaging in real combat. And the Commando Elite, led by Chip Hazard, played by Tommy Lee Jones, tries to. Their goal is to wipe out the Gorgonites, led by I can't remember his name now. Archer, played by Frank Langella, in a suburban neighborhood, and the neighbor is played by Kirsten Dunst, and you also have the family played by Kevin Dunn, and you also have Phil Hartman in his last film before. The last film that he did, because 2 months prior to this, he was killed by his wife, and that happened 2 months before this movie came out, and it was also the last film for Clint Walker, and this is definitely a premise that could actually lead to something enjoyable and fun. But what it ends up being is Joe Dante just basically trying to create a 90s equivalent to something like Gremlins. I mean, that's all this really is basically a 90s equivalent of Gremlins. You just replace Zach Gilligan and Phoebe Cates with Gregory Smith and Kirsten Dunst, replace Stripe with Chip Hazard, replace Gizmo with Archer. It's basically the same movie, and it's not a particularly good one. I mean, there are some good moments. The special effects are nicely done. The rest of the movie itself, it does kind of drag a little bit, and it does get way too dark at times. Like, you almost would think that this is a spin-off of the Child's Play movie at times, with the way that especially the girlfriend's dolls, what are they? The Gwendy dolls, that's what they're called. I'm looking it up on here, but yeah, when these things get the chip inside of them, they turn pretty freaky, man. Like, those things are just, like, that's nightmare fuel right there. But there are moments in there that are funny. There are moments that actually do kind of work, but just as a whole, the movie doesn't. I gotta stop doing that, man. I have my page up on here, and these ads automatically play on you, and that's why you hear that music in the background. I just gotta stop doing that. But anyway, like I was saying, the Small Soldiers, the overall movie itself just doesn't work as a whole. You could tell that there is a plot there that has potential and something awesome, and at times it can be that way, like a mix of Toy Story meets Gremlins, but it just never comes together as a whole like it wants to try to. It's got a good cast overall, really, but other than that, though, it doesn't really have a whole lot there to save it. It's kind of fun, it's kind of cheesy fun at times, but never enough for me to say that you have to go see this movie. I would only say watch it if you grew up with the film and you have that nostalgic feel to it, which I do. I grew up with the film when it came out. I know it's not a good movie, but it does have its moments, so yeah, not a great film, but definitely not as bad as it could be. Kind of like Lethal Weapon 4. Or not as bad as you would think it would be, I would say, but it's kind of on the same level as Lethal Weapon 4, but so that's Small Soldiers. Let's go ahead and move on to the next movie we have here, and that is Madeline. So in terms of Madeline, I mostly remember growing up with the TV series when it was on Disney Channel back in the 90s. That's pretty much my memory of Madeline altogether. I knew this movie existed, but I never really got around to actually watching the film, despite the fact that it had Frances McDormand in it and also Nigel Hawthorne. And it looked like a faithful adaptation to the books this is based on. The film's plot is basically using the elements from the first 4 books, and it definitely has the ebb and flow of the books and the TV show. And it's directed by Daisy Von Schliele-Meyer, who actually had another movie come out this year we already talked about called Woo. And Jennifer Flackett and Mark Levine, who would later go on to write and direct Little Manhattan and also Nim's Island. and also would write films like Wimbledon, Journey to the Center of the Earth, and more recently, The Atom Project, which is a really good movie. And they also are the creators of Big Mouth and also the spin-off Human Resources. From what I remember from the movie when I watched it, I saw it when I was little, and I thought it was just alright. I mean, it looked like a straightforward adaptation of the story. I thought the casting overall looked pretty good. The visuals overall kind of are reminiscent to what they were in the book, but it's been a long time since I've seen this movie. I don't know if it honestly would hold up, but just from my recollection of it, I remember not hating it. I remember actually did kind of enjoying it, but I remember more of the TV show and the animated movie that came around that time from the TV show. I think it was Lost in Paris, I think it was. I can't remember what it was. It came out the same year as this, I think. Let me see here. Or the year after that, I should say. Yeah, 1999 is when that came out. That's what I remember from that. But other than that, though, as far as the live-action film goes, I remember it not being terrible. I mean, I remember it actually being somewhat decent, so I would think it still holds up after all these years. But like I said, I haven't seen it in a while, so I don't know if it still holds up, but it probably does. So that's Madeline. So let's go ahead and move on to the next movie, and that is Darren Aronofsky's Pi. So this is, of course, the feature directorial debut for Darren Aronofsky, and this is basically filmed on high-contrast black and white reversal film, and the title refers, of course, to the mathematical constant pi, which is 3.14. The story focuses on a mathematician with an obsession to find underlying complete order in the real world and contrasting two seemingly irreconcilable entities, the imperfect irrationality of humanity and the regal irregularity of mathematics, specifically number theory. The film explores themes of religion, mysticism, and the relationship of the universe to mathematics. It's been a while since I've seen this movie, so I don't remember too much about it from the one time I saw it, but I remember liking it as this bizarre-looking psychological thriller. And it's Darren Aronofsky, man. Darren Aronofsky does not make a lot of bad movies. Every once in a while, it's like the worst thing I think he's ever directed was probably The Fountain, but even then, there is stuff there to admire about it. But other than that, not much more after that. I mean, it's not a film that I would say is a classic, is one of his best films. I'd probably say stuff like The Wrestler, Black Swan, even Mother are movies that I think are much better than probably his best films overall. But like I said, he has not made a really terrible movie. The worst movie he ever made was The Fountain, and even then, it's not a bad movie per se in terms of the visuals. The visuals still look good, but it's one of those pretentious style over substance movies that really does not come together as well as you think it would. But this film definitely works with the style, and it does leave a lasting impact on you with just some of the imagery that you see in there. Just the trailer alone is just like it gets you thinking about what you're going to see when you watch this movie, which I did see a long time ago, and I think it works very well. I think it is a very well-made film, and one that you should definitely check out, especially if you haven't seen if you've seen any of the other Darren Aronofsky films. It's kind of recommended you actually check this one out. And it's a really good movie. I'd say definitely check it out. If you've seen Aronofsky's other movies, you will probably like this one a lot. So with that said, on to the last movie, and that is Hands on a Hard Body, the documentary. I had no idea what this movie was about until I watched the trailer for it, and when I see what it is, it pretty much makes sense. So yeah, this is basically a documentary talking about the yearly competition that pits 24 different contestants against each other to see who can keep their hand on a pickup truck for the longest amount of time. Whoever endures the longest without leaning on the truck or squatting wins the truck. 5-minute breaks are issued every hour, and 15-minute breaks every 6 hours. You probably have seen this if you've seen this in various storylines. If you've watched My Name is Earl, they did an episode where Earl and his brother Randy had to do the same thing. I think it was for a regular car, and I think Family Guy also did it as well. So this is something that has been done before, and this feels like something that would come from the show like This American Life, which is actually something that is actually used. Large portions of the film's audio were included on one of the episodes for This American Life. This just feels like something that you would see on that type of a show. And I've seen a little bit of it. It's a pretty interesting documentary to watch. I mean, and it is a pretty interesting situation to be in. I mean, you basically have to keep your hand on this car if you want to win it for a long period of time. And, if we're being honest, I probably would not be able to do it because 5-minute breaks issued every hour, 15-minute breaks every 6 hours. Even with those, like, you can't lean, you can't squat. At some point, you're going to have to, your body has to contort to something. Like, you have to, it's like you're not going to be able to hold it that long. I mean, you have to be really damn good in order to have that happen to you, in order for you to hold on to this and just put your hand on this car and make sure that you actually hold on to it without leaning or anything. Like, that's pretty damn hard to do. I could never do that in my lifetime, not in a million years. So I give a lot of credit to these people that actually do this, because that's something that actually is really, really tough to do, honestly. And I would think it would be tough to do, but like I said, I've only seen a little bit of it, but it definitely piques my interest, and therefore I do kind of want to watch this whole movie overall. So maybe one day I'll definitely check it out. And it's got a stage musical too, which is very interesting to see on that front. That actually was adapted into a musical of all things. But like I said, I haven't seen the movie in full, but it definitely has some good ideas that I think I would want to check out at some point. But yeah, very interesting documentary from the little bit that I've seen there. That's Hands on a Hard Body. So with that said, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. When we meet next time, 4 more movies, including Antonio Banderas and Catherine Zeta-Jones in The Mask of Zorro, the Farrelly Brothers' big comedy hit, There's Something About Mary, with Ben Affleck, Ben Stiller, and Cameron Diaz. Probably be a much different movie if Ben Affleck was in there, but Ben Stiller, Cameron Diaz, Matt Dillon, classic comedy. So we already have at least 2 good movies to talk about there, and we also have Polish Wedding and The Thief. So 4 movies to look at next time. We will delve into those on the next episode. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and also don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this. So with that said, I am off. I will see you guys next time, and until then, as always, take care.